Alright, we're back. We're going to continue this build. In this video, I'm going to only cover diff shimming. I wanted to make it its own video so it's easy to refer to. It's something a lot of people struggle with, and it can lead to problems, DNFs, and a lot of unnecessary expense in replacing gears, etc. So I wanted to try to do my best to cover this in a way that anybody can understand it and hopefully prevent anybody from having issues with our gears. So the shimming from the SBX-1, it no longer applies to shimming the SBX-2 because the gearboxes have changed. So even though the ring and pinions are the same and the diffs are the same, the gearboxes themselves are different. So you need to be aware of what your end goal is with shimming and what you're really trying to do with the shims, and not just trying to throw them together because that's how you've done it in the past. You really need to know what you're trying to do. So I'm going to try to explain that the best I can. So, when you're shimming a diff, you're essentially trying to get the gear alignment with as much contact in these teeth as you possibly can. With these shims, what you're doing is you're aligning that diff from side to side to mesh up with the pinion to where the teeth are as deep connected to the diff gear. The pinion is connected to this as deep as possible without there being excessive bind or crunching due to it being too tight. The same as you would do with your clutch bell and your spur gear, how you set that mesh, you're doing the exact same thing with your diff. You're just using the shims to move your diff over versus moving like your motor over with the motor mount. It's the exact same theory. Now, I will say that in most cases, you need to run your diffs tighter on the shimming or tighter on the mesh than you would your, say, clutch bell and spur gear that you are used to setting a certain way. You probably need to run your diffs tighter than you would that because of the excessive stress that this takes. And because it's mounted inside of plastic, plastic gets hot, it flexes, it loosens up during runs. All the variables that come into play with where this diff is mounted and how it's mounted makes you need to shim it tighter so that it doesn't damage the gears or cause excessive wear. So another thing that you need to know about shimming your diff is you want to always shim it so that when you got it in here, it can't move side to side. When you got your diffs, your shims all right, this diff is solid in place and can't move. You do not want this diff to be able to shift anyway. So that's important to know when shimming your diff. As this case wears, you might have to add a shim or whatever. You just need to know that when you're checking your shimming, always check side to side play and make sure it can't move. So with all that said, we're going to go ahead and move forward with shimming this rear diff up. So I'm going to start with, we'll just start with 2 shims, 1 on each side, and see where that puts us. So right off the bat, I can tell it's got still a little bit of side to side movement. So I'm going to need to run 1 more shim. So I'm definitely going to need to run 3 shims instead of 2, which on the SBX-1 I know I ran 2 shims. So we're going to need to run 3 shims on this. Now then, we'll go ahead and add a 3rd shim to the cup side, and that's going to put 2 here, 1 here, and we'll see where that puts us. You want to make sure your shims get seated all the way down in there. They should be right direct same size as the bearing, so if they're not right there flush with the bearing, you know they're not seated in. So how you want to check this is you basically just grab your pinion, hold it solid, and then you want to just move this like you would setting your clutch bell and spur gear. You're going to hold one or the other, and you're going to move the other one to see how much backlash there is. You're going to do the exact same thing on this. You're going to hold the pinion solid and just move the diff back and forth to see how much play there is. And you want very, very little play. You don't want it notch. You want as tight as you can run it without it binding the gears up. So where it's just got just a tiny bit of play back and forth, that's where you want to run it. Which is where this is at. It's probably got so little you can't even see it on the camera, but that's where you want it. You definitely want to make sure when it's brand new that you don't shim it too loose right off the bat. When you're running a brand new kit, these gears are brand spanking new. They're not, the pinion and the diff gear have not had a chance to like mate together yet. They're not going to be butter smooth when you first put your kit together. So be careful you don't try to shim this too loose to try to get your gears super smooth. Know that shim it snug where there's very little play, and after you run this car one time, that diff will, the teeth will actually wear together, a lot deeper contact, and you will have a much, much smoother diff from that point forward. So with this rear diff, I'm going 2 shims on the cup side and 1 on the gear side, and that seems to be yeah, that seems to be pretty good. So then we'll just pop our cover right on there. You make sure your shims are all the way in, or when you pop that cover on, it's going to ruin them. Okay. Actually, I think I'm going to go ahead and shim it 1 tighter than that. That feels kind of loose to me. So like I said, be very careful that you do not shim it too loose. That right there, I would say I definitely could have got away with it. But I'm not trying to build my car to where I can just get away with it. I'm trying to build my car to where it's going to last a long time and be the right way. So yeah, so with the shim, 2 shims on the gear side and 1 on the cup side, that feels much tighter. It's actually a little bit snug right now, but like I said, the gears are brand spanking new, so you want them to be a little bit snug, brand new. But you can still hear it's got just a tiny bit of backlash in it. So Now you can see that even with that cover put on there, this still is, it still moves free. It's not crunchy, it's not binding. So that's where we want to be on the rear diff. So now we're going to do the exact same process on the front diff. So in theory, it should shim the same way. So we're going to start with the exact same shimming that we just put on the rear. 2 on the gear side, 1 on the cup side, and see what we got. Yep, it came out basically exactly the same amount of mesh. So I got 2 on the gear side, 1 on the cup side. And you just, like I said, you want to make sure you feel side to side and there's absolutely no movement back and forth. And that your shims are all the way in. And then pop your covers on and bolt it together. So hopefully this video was very clear on the process you're trying to achieve by shimming the diffs, and maybe it will help some people understand exactly what you're trying to do and how to go about doing it, because I know it's something that seems simple, but it's something that I over the years have numerously found people doing incorrectly. It can be expensive and very, very frustrating whenever you get it wrong. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.